So, welcome back to another episode for Young Bloom's Flower School. Sun's shining, I'm working at home and I'm in my greenhouse / workshop. Another sustainable option in design for you, and I think probably inspired by the Queen's funeral on Monday. She had a wreath on her coffin, which was really beautiful. So flowers grown, I think, at Balmoral, Highgrove and Buckingham Palace, I think. But the nicest thing about it was that it was in moss. So that's what I'm going to do today and talk you through it. So let's get started. So the idea being I will soak the moss and then place it into this base, and my thought is that I will run string around the outside because I don't want to use tape. I just want it to be completely compostable, so use string round all the way to hold the moss in place, because I think there's always that fear of God that someone will tip it upside down and when they shouldn't, and everything will just go flying. So at least something will keep that moss in place, being the string. So I've soaked this moss fairly well. I'm just going to break it up into pieces and start sort of placing it in. I think you're probably going to need it to be fairly full so that it can hold, because if you think about chicken wire, you always need double layer of chicken wire because there's not enough for the stems to be stable if there's only one layer. So just going to finish putting this round. Right, there we go. So moss is in. Might put a bit more. There we go. Right, moss is in. Just going to get the string. My thought is this. Okay, so my thought is I'm just going to tie this into place. Hopefully you can see this okay. So just going to gently weave the string round so that it holds the moss into place. The string, I'm pulling it tight each time I go around. So this is just acting like pot tape essentially, but obviously is nice and compostable, which we like. And I still want someone to make some recycled pot tape or something that's compostable but acts like tape. It'd be lovely. Okay, and then using scissors I can tie back onto the knot that was there. So you can see it's all in place. So that, my theory is that will hold and make it secure. So next step is foliage. So I've started putting foliage in. I'm using Senecio, which I grow where I work, and this is, I'm a bit rubbish with trees, but I think it's either an alder or a hazel, and I'm lucky where the polytunnels are where I grow. I get to responsibly forage foliage. So this stuff is lovely. It does need a drink, so you need to cut it probably a good 12 hours before you're going to use it, but it stays it holds its own. It has a good length on it, so if you need it for things like, if you're doing a bigger arrangement like a pedestal or a milk churn, it works a treat for that. But also, as you can see, I'm chopping it down and using it as a smaller foliage. Right, I've also got some Pittosporum, again different type of texture, which is lovely. Nice to have that balance of the silver and the dark green. Just very simply working around the circle and filling up before I start with the flowers. The foliage I'm twisting as I put it in to sort of get it through the moss, and it seems to, you can see it sort of holding its own quite nicely. So I will continue with the foliage and come back to you when it's done. The foliage is now done, and I'm just going to show you. So we've got the hazel / alder, not quite sure. We've got some lemon balm, put some mint in there. We've got the Senecio and the Pittosporum. So kind of a nice contrast of of colours, and hopefully you can see that okay. Quite relaxed as always, but the main thing I did think about actually in putting the string over, and it might be a slight issue because you need to think about sort of trailing the foliage over the edge just so that you hide, because you think if this is a funeral piece and someone is sitting and the coffin is right next to them, they might be able to see the string, so just to think about that. But as always, I think you notice these things as you create and you build and you work to kind of cover up what you need to cover up. So that's foliage, and I think we'll start with the flowers. So I'm mostly going to be using dahlias for this one, and they're all dahlias that are grown in my garden. So you can see sort of they range from peach through to pale yellow, sort of quite summery, lovely sort of colours. There's some really pinky pink ones which are nice pom-pom. So this has been a really interesting exercise because I've been working on this on my bench, and you kind of miss, I think, a lot of the gaps and also the overall shape. Because the tray is quite deep, I think I've tended to cut things a bit longer than they should be, so you want to cut things a bit shorter. And also I think I've needed a foliage that's a bigger leaf so you get more coverage. So I've got some sage that I can use, so I'll fill the gaps with that and have a tweak. But that's all of the dahlias in there. I've also put some spray rose, cosmos and a couple of cornflowers with all the dahlia. So yeah, I mean the colour palette is lovely, quite sort of gentle, quite relaxed, but there's still too many gaps for me, so I'm going to have another tweak. So hopefully you can see I've put 3 or 4 pieces in of the sage just to kind of fill those gaps, and it helped. And I just think sometimes you have ideas, you have thoughts, and they don't always work out how you think they will. And I think that's okay, I think that's alright. I think if I do this again I would do it slightly differently, but it's really interesting to experiment because I want more sustainable ways of doing things. I don't want to be using. So I really hope you found that helpful, and I look forward to seeing you next time.